It's Mandy Branham here, aka the Joint Venture Queen. This is the show called The Full-Time Investor because I am a full-time investor. And I want to kind of start out quickly by giving a little bit of a shout out to those that I know, those that I don't know. I thank you for being here. I thank you for watching. And I encourage you, leave us some comments, reach out to me. If you're stuck in a spot, if you need some little bit of guidance, I want to be able to thank you for coming and learning and supporting me. And so I want to be able to support you as well. So let's hop on a quick discovery call. If you've got some concerns in your real estate portfolio, I'd love to be able to see how I can add value to you. So thank you very much. And talking about adding value, my show guest today is somebody who not only adds value to his own portfolio, but to his clients' portfolio and to fellow investors. And he's certainly added value to me along the way. So I want to welcome Kyle Ford to the show today. Larry, thanks for bringing him in. Kyle, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. It's we're in the same time zone, which is kind of cool for my show guests. 11 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Kyle, we've known each other well since our days meeting at our coaching program. I'd love to be able to have you share your version of your journey as a real estate investor with the audience today.
Okay, yeah, great. It started. I made my first investment in December of 2013. Prior to any education, I bought a pre-construction condo because my mom told me that was a good thing to do.
My mom.
Yeah. The next one was a year later. My brother was about to sell his single-family home in Woodstock. It was a $160,000 house. He had about $30,000 in equity in it, so I gave him $15,000, and we were partners on that. Then I went to I got involved in a coaching program in March of 2015. Where I was enlightened to the different avenues. Prior to 2015 and after 2015, I was working as a financial advisor. So I was very much the conventional way. You know, you got to pay down your house. If the TDS ratio is too high, you don't qualify, that type of mentality. But I was introduced to joint venture partners, how to raise money, and that there's no such thing as a 3-property max, which my director of finance at my financial planning company told me. Yeah, absolutely. So even after that event, I still I was comfortable with single family homes, so I stuck with single family homes. I bought 2 more rentals. I partnered with some family members, but then I realized that if I wanted to grow, I needed to get into multi. So I started with triplexes. I live and invest in Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge. So I was buying underperforming triplexes. So stuff that the rent was okay, but the condition wasn't great. We do clean patch paint, light renovations, and just fix it up and get a little bit better rent for it. From there, I moved into I wanted to sell my financial business. I wanted to get out of that, so I started flipping houses to kind of replace my income because the cash flow that was coming from the properties wasn't income replacing cash flow. It was nice to come in. So I started flipping houses. Really honed in on my construction skills, flow of construction, how to manage trades. And then from there, I also got into short-term rentals, cottages. I bought 2 cottages with vendor take-back.
We're going to talk about that's one of your $1 million creative financing strategies. So that's definitely going to be a hot topic for us today.
That's right. Yeah. So I bought. I'm actually closing on my 4th, 5th, and 6th cottages this month. So we're up to 6 now on the cottage side, and then the deal that I've met a lot of people over and been shown quite a bit on social media is my 10-plex. I bought an underperforming 10-plex last January with a $49,000 net operating income, and within a calendar year, I've brought that net operating income up to $174,000. So almost a little over a triple on the NOI in a year. So.
Right. And I have to confess that I geeked out on on that YouTube, and I was like, you've got my attention. So Kyle, you're doing things that are gaining people's attention because these are things that that, when I, make the show topic, how to have $1 million of creative financing, we're talking, people are starting out going, whoa, $1 million of creative financing. I'm trying to figure out how to get my first $10,000 to borrow for a renovation, or I'm trying to figure out how to attract my first joint venture partner. And, I can kind of only think that I can ask them for $50,000. So what's been your mindset and how you've grown from the thought of, I know you said that one of your first properties was with your brother and you gave him $15,000 to be able to get in this thing. So what's some of the mindset shifts that have gone from starting to borrow your first amounts to being able to be confident enough to have this $1 million creative financing mindset?
Well, I guess on some of those first smaller loans that I borrowed and the smaller amounts, it was a big percentage of that person's net worth. If I borrowed $50,000 from somebody, maybe they were only worth $300,000. So we're talking about almost 20% of their total net worth. And they were nervous. They were more stressed out about it. And what I learned is, as I started talking to people with a higher net worth, lending $1 million from the people that I borrowed is only maybe 5% of their net worth. So is it important to them that the money's safe and secured and that I know what I'm doing? Absolutely. But they're also business owners, so they're looking at things differently. They're not concerned. They understand that I'm borrowing money at a higher interest rate because I'm investing in a business, not just a person buying their single family home. So I guess I didn't go from 50,000 to $1 million. I went from 50,000 to 100 to 300. And as I started talking to different people that had access to more capital, I realized that it was the same conversation, but to that person, $1 million was actually a less percentage of their net worth than the person that I first borrowed $50,000 from.
And, I hear your story, I feel you, and I'm watching you, and I bet you that you also became better. You said it's the same conversation, but were you able to say it better because you've said it 5 times or 10 times or 100 times and had the no's or had the I'm not interested, or next thing you know, you and also probably correlating to that is your net worth increased. Would you potentially have a way to be able to look at that?
That's 100% correct, Mandy. I certainly didn't. The first person I ever asked for a big ticket loan, it wasn't an instant yes. My confidence went up every single time that I was asking, and I think my confidence was certainly going up every time I was asking. And I think ask for referrals. Ask for people. When you talk to one person who lends you money, they're going to their dinner party bragging to all their friends how they're getting 10 or 12% on their money. So don't be afraid to ask that person for referrals. That's on the 10plex project. That was a referral from somebody that I first borrowed, I think $200,000 from them, and they referred me to one of their friends who had more money, who would be more than willing to do that. So.
Yep. Larry's putting your social media stuff down there in your website. And then, that's another way that we feel the perception is that we have to be professional to be able to attract the higher amounts of money. But what are some other ways that you showed up? That you could say, did you have a reference sheet that said, here are all of the past projects that I've done? I had somebody say to me one time, this isn't your first rodeo, is it? And I was like, nope, no, it's not. And so, you're carrying around this resume of what you've done in the past. What are some of the things that you share that maybe you can share with other people as to how you position yourself to an investor that's in front of you to be able to share your back history with them to create confidence?
Right. Well, the one thing I want to mention is a lot of people, when they're talking to the higher net worth people, they want to lead with how great the return is. And I actually start more in my experience from the financial services industry and investing. They're more concerned about preservation of wealth than the high rate of return. So by starting with the risk management side and how I'm going to mitigate the risk on the transaction is a way to build trust. And at the end of the day, they were referred, or they knew that I was willing to pay a good rate of return in the beginning But if you go right at I'll pay you 12%. It's a great deal. They're coming to their own conclusions about risk. So you want to be on top of the risk side, how you're keeping their capital safe, how you've done this before, and I guess that's where that's where in terms of my resume, I'm asking for referrals from people who have borrowed money. I borrowed money from before, so like he's paid me back 3 times before. He's on time. He says he's going to do what he's going to do. I thought his numbers were a little bit high on the ARV, but he's delivered every single time. So I got no reason to dispute him on this one. So
absolutely. And I like that super nicely from your experience as a financial planner. As investors, we go, oh, what would I lend my money out at? And so that's what we jump to be able to assume that, well, if I want a 15% return, then everybody wants a 15% return. But there certainly is a level of wealth preservation. I love that you said that. I love talking about that. And it's not, there's some people who are looking to get rich quick. Those might not be the best mindset of lenders that you want into your lending landscape.
100%. 100%.
What are some of the things that you look for in a lender that to the point that maybe you would say no to somebody if they had certain traits that didn't match what it is you were looking for in a lender?
So even though I'm confident in my timelines and my projections, I never want to be borrowing money from somebody who needs it on that day.
Oh,
so if I'm borrowing for a year and they need it on the next day, at the end of the day, as confident as I am, if I'm refinancing, we all know these institutions can drag their heels. If I'm selling, what if somebody doesn't close on time? So I want to make sure that this isn't. They're not counting on this money on the day that our term goes to, and I also want to make sure it's not their last dollar. I don't want to be taking, if they have $100,000 to invest. Personally, I'm just not interested in taking their funds. That's a lot. At the end of the day, stuff can go wrong here, and I would take a job at McDonald's to pay somebody back if I had to. But I don't want to take somebody's last dollar on a deal. It's just too much personal stress. That's it.
Yeah. So you make sure that it's not their last dollar. So you're definitely looking at their entire portfolio, their entire financial situation. And you like people who have some flexibility in timelines. Those are essential. I really like those ones. So, again, we've talked about this $1 million. I'd love for you to share your first $1 million creative financing strategy. What you can share with the audience.
Yeah, so the first time I raised $1 million on a deal was the 10-plex project in Cambridge. The project I purchased for 1.3. The lender on closing closed with 1.5 million. So on the closing of the property, I got $1 million out of their RRSP that was deferred for an entire year, no payments for a year. And then the additional 1.3. What's that?
There we are. $1 million out of your RSP. I'm certainly making notes. I hope you guys are too. Larry Berry, is this on our side, producer, or is this on Kyle's side? Oh, sorry. Kyle went blank there. If you're there, I'm here.
Can you hear me okay, Mandy?
I can hear you now. Absolutely. Okay. So you went $1 million from your RSP. That's where I left off.
So the purchase price was 1.3. I closed with a $1.5 million loan. It was $1 million in cash. $1 million in RRSP and $500 in cash. So we actually closed and we got a $75,000 check on closing with the keys to the 10-plex. So the way that was designed was the RSP was allowed to defer for a year, but Olympia required a payment after 6 months. So they advanced additional cash on closing to make the payment to themselves to the RSP. So I borrowed 1.5 with no payments for a year. And with that transaction, I know I might be repeating myself, but it was I borrowed there was one lender that I used several times on my flips who lent me 300,000, 250, 400, and he was always the first mortgage on my flips. And when this deal came up, I talked to him about JVing it because I thought the dollars were too big to borrow it privately. And he's like, well, I'm not interested in JVing, and I can't lend you that type of money privately, but I have somebody who has that type of money who would be happy to do it. So that's where I was referred to that person. He ran over a couple of my other deals, and he said, yeah, it's for him, that dollar amount was no different than a millionaire lending 200,000. He's a multi-millionaire lending $1 million. It was a small percentage of his net worth, and he was comfortable with my track record and the fact that he was a first position mortgage on the property.
Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate. That's fine for you, Kyle, because you're a mortgage broker. What are some other ways that people can create this? Does it mean you have to be a mortgage specialist to have access to this? What are some tips that you can give people to have their RRSP talk with somebody and how they can utilize an RRSP mortgage?
So being a mortgage broker helps me maybe talk the talk a little bit better. But my profession was not the reason why this person lent to me. They lent me because of my track record as a real estate investor, my construction experience, the projects that I've done. Now, the RSP conversation wasn't specific to me being a mortgage broker. It was just that he had access to those funds there that he didn't necessarily know that he could lend on mortgages. And when I mentioned it to him that he could do it out of an RRSP, he's like, well, I actually bought some weed. Ironically enough, he bought weed stocks in his RRSP and had a couple $1 million in there that he didn't know what to do with. So that's where the conversation went to. So don't be afraid. People, it's crazy to me, but people treat their RRSPs differently than cash. They're way more comfortable to do different things with their RRSP than they were cash. So yeah.
Okay, so then there's a lot of people that'll say to me, how do you make a property cash flow, Mandy, when I have to include a HELOC fee? So here's Kyle going into this now with private cash that you've borrowed and a fee for that, and private, an RSP mortgage, which I would assume is probably higher than a standard bank rate. But how do you make all of your numbers work with the cost of financing?
Right. So this deal is very unique where the property sat on the market for several months. It was listed at 1.7 million. It did not cash flow at 1.7. I ended up securing it for 1.3 because they were having issues with closing. I found out later the owners were being sued. I didn't know that when I was doing it, so they were in a rush to sell. So the numbers did not work at 1.3 million. It still was cash flow negative. So the reason why this deal was structured this way is because I didn't have a mortgage payment for a year. So the carrying costs were minimal. The key to this deal was being able to empty out the building. There was, when I closed on January 4th, 9 of the 10 units were occupied, and by the end of June, the building was fully vacant. So once we were able to vacate the building, we were able to renovate it and bring it in at top market rents, which the cash flow numbers worked. So it's about being able to identify what you're looking at. If you're trying to buy a turnkey property, it needs the cash flow. But all the people that looked at that property were evaluating it as a turnkey, but it wasn't a turnkey. It was underperforming. So you had to structure the financing in a way that allowed you to go into that property, renovate it, and get it up to market rents.
Okay, so a huge risk in that, and we're talking, I love your 10 unit, but we can break this down to a duplex that's fully occupied, a triplex, a fourplex, whatever number we want. What if you hadn't had 10 units emptied? What if there would have been 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people that hung around? What were some of the backups to the backups to the backups for you to be able to execute your strategy?
Well, the landlord-tenant law, there's an N13 construction notice. You are allowed to renovate the building. So I was confident in my ability, based on the current condition of the property and the current landlord rules, that I could serve the N13 construction notice, which gives 3 months of free rent. I don't have a mortgage payment, so that's not the end of the world to me. 3 months of free rent, plus their last month's deposit. So they have to leave in 120 days. As long as you pull your permits and you're legitimately going to do major construction, the tenants have to leave. I'm not, and I'd love to talk to you about this because it's something, a stigma that I'm trying to change in the landlording world. This is not a rent eviction. A rent eviction is when you say you're going to do these things, you go in and try to put a coat of paint on, change the flooring, and jack up the rent. That's a rent eviction. This is a legal rule in the law that we are allowed to serve a construction notice. If we pull permits, we upgraded plumbing systems, electrical systems, fire systems, HVAC systems. We fully redid this building. We are allowed to do it. Now,
you know what? I just want to hone in on the amazingness of that. You took potentially an unsafe, unregulated, fire hazard. We're not talking paint and flooring here because, oh my gosh, it doesn't cash flow. You're like, the safety of these tenants requires these units to meet code today. So the permit issue is such a big issue. Kyle, I commend you on that. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's super important. Okay, go from there because I'm behind you right now 100%. Love it.
Love it. Okay, so now once you've served the N13, the tenants have to leave. The biggest concern is that they can come back at the same market rents. Right. We were honest and upfront with the tenants about the issues in the building. We got all of our permits. We showed them all the permits. We had all that stuff. Now we were in a position where the tenants accepted the fact that they had to leave, and there was a lot of uncertainty about when this was going to be done. Once the tenants were in a position where they understood what was going on and that they were leaving, they were much more receptive for a cash for keys offer.
Okay.
So now they've accepted the fact that they're moving, accepted the fact that they're signing a lease, accepted the fact that they don't know when they can get back in here. So when we have the conversation about, listen, we'd love to do a cash offer to have a mutual release done, they were much more open to that. So we had one unit vacant, so 9 out of 9 units all signed. They took a cash offer. We set it up where we said, if you want to wait till the end of the term, you can get your free rent. Or if you're able to leave sooner to give us access to the units, we'll advance you those free months rent that you're entitled to as cash. So a lot of them actually left early to get the extra money. So
maybe 3 months worth of rent that they were paying.
It was about, I've got to double check my numbers, but a little under $40,000 was my total expense for this buyout. Including the 3 months rent, including the cash that we paid. We helped a couple people with moving expenses. We tried to. Those tenants, they weren't necessarily happy about it. We did try to treat people with dignity. We treated them with respect. We understand that moving is not a fun process. So my property manager was fantastic, and he relocated a bunch of the tenants to other properties. He found listings that they couldn't find, and so we did everything we could to help them find a new place. At the end of the day, not one tenant, everybody signed. And even though a couple weren't exactly in love with us, everybody understood where we were coming from and what we were doing by the end of it.
Excellent, excellent. And you were changing and adding value. You were legalizing. You were opening permits. The city would be happy with you. ESA would be happy with you. I mean, like, your neighbors around were probably like, yay. And I remember watching the video, and you had this truck trailer of stuff. So why don't you tell us now, again, the difference between a duplex and this 10 unit is really just quantity, but what are some of the first that you went through as you were doing this to be like, hey, I might have been fearful of this, but I went through it, and now I'm happy to share with people some of the learning with that?
Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's simply adding another zero. Everything was the same, except instead of one electrical van, there was 3. Instead of one plumbing van, there was 3. Instead of my 12-foot, or I should say Chelsea's 12-foot enclosed trailer, it was a 52-foot enclosed trailer. What I did find is I got better pricing on everything. When you order a 52-foot trailer full of something, you get a better price. I told a little joke on that video, and when I ordered that trailer and I was dealing with the flooring people, I'm like, so how do we unload it when it gets to the 10-plex? And they're like, well, you need to have lift trucks in there to do it. I'm like, okay, but what about the other people's stuff in the trailer, like the other deliveries that you're making? And the guy just started laughing. He goes, there's nobody else's stuff. You have the whole trailer. And that was just crazy to me. I couldn't believe it. But a fun little fact, to rent that trailer was $500 to leave it on site for a month.
That's less than a coffin.
That's exactly right. Sorry, I lost my. Exactly right. It was $500. So that the flooring people didn't even know they could do that for $500. But we dug in, we found out. Other than that, the other kind of aha moment I had was it was just the one day I was there. I think there was about 12 or 13 vans there, different carpenters, plumbers, electricians, all that type of stuff. And it was just crazy to me that I was, feeding that many families. That many people were, next Friday when their paychecks went home, that was my project that was funding that. And I don't feel like I'm that big of an investor, but when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is a real business now.
Yes, I had that one time. Quick little story. I went into a job site and somebody's like, "Oh my gosh, the boss is here!" And I looked behind me and I was like, "Who's here?" And then I was like, "Oh, they're talking about me." And I came home. I have a thing that I want to be able to add value to 1,000 families, and so I added my plumber and electricians and contractors. And you realize that you are adding value more than just to the families that will occupy the units, but to so many different families. So I commend you. You know what? There's one other $1 million that I know that now I'll call it creative financing because vendor takebacks are very creative. Why don't you tell people about these cottages that you are gathering, if you're closing on the next few in the next little bit, where that came from and where the first one came from and the $1 million that you creatively financed that first one with?
Yep. Okay. So first cottage I bought was in Wyerton, Ontario. That's when that was back in July 2016. I purchased that from a colleague that I worked with in the financial office referred me to somebody. And I tell everybody in my area and everybody I meet that I'm a real estate investor. I buy properties in any condition and I can close in cash. So this guy mentioned that he had a friend who was selling a cottage. And so he referred me to that friend, and so I met with him, and we were looking over the property, and I was like, "Hey, so I wanted to ask you, would you be interested in holding financing?" And the guy's like, "Well, I thought you closed cash." I was like, "Well, I can, but if you're able to hold financing, I might be able to give you a better offer. And I also know that you paid a lot less for this cottage than you're selling it for, so you have a bit of a tax issue or a capital gains issue. If you held financing, you could reduce that." The other thing I knew is the reason why he was selling the cottage is because he had a house in Florida and a house in Turks and Caicos. So I put two and two together that this guy was doing okay.
Yes.
So I asked him about the vendor take back, and he's like, I'm not really sure about that, not really interested. Next day, he called me back. He said, I spoke with my accountant. My accountant thought it was an incredible idea, and we're very interested in doing it. So that was the first VTB I secured, which was a $295,000 VTB, which was 90% loan to value, 5-year term at 3.99. So there was no income check, there was no credit check, there was no paperwork. It was an equity loan based on his existing property, and I used Airbnb income to service the debt. So we rented it out short term. So that was the first cottage I ever bought. I always wanted a cottage. It wasn't about the numbers for me. I didn't care if I lost a little bit of money every year. It was about I wanted to own a cottage. It was more of a lifestyle choice than an investment. So that property then led to I always wanted to own in Grand Bend. That was where I wanted to buy cottages. I actually found another cottage that came to me at a point where I did not have the funds to buy it, and it was the best deal I had seen in a long time. So I actually called the same lender who VTB'd me the first cottage to see if he would loan me money to buy the next one. And he did. His rate went up. He wasn't charging me 4% anymore, but he did agree to lend that to me. So I bought the second cottage, no credit checks, no income checks. That one was 15% down. So once I owned that cottage, we were doing some work at the property, and the beachfront cottage across the road they came and put a for sale sign in it. So I was like, oh, it's 1 point. It was listed for 1.3 million. I was like, I can't swing that. Then my neighbor came over, and she's the neighbor who knows everything about everybody. She started talking to me about how it's a wealthy family. They never use it. They bought it for their daughter's wedding. And I was like, So I called my realtor on that one, which I think you know, Justin Conoco.
You like your little wheels just must be like tick, 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 tick.
My buddy was working with me on the cottage, and he's not an investor at all. He's a longtime friend of mine. And I go to him. I was like, she just told me something. I'm going to buy that cottage. And he's like, what did she tell you? I'm like, I'm going to buy that cottage. So Justin Conoco was my realtor on that one. He's from the Grand Bend area. We did a double offer. So we offered $1 million cash for the property, or 1.1 million with $1 million vendor take back. So the guy, his son is actually an accountant, which I didn't know. His son is actually an accountant. Sorry. And they knew the difference to the VTB. They knew the benefit. I've never had this happen before, but he actually signed both offers back. He said, we'll either do 1.1 million cash or 1.12 with $1 million VTB. So
Gotcha.
I figured out what he needed a little bit more cash out of it. So he was comfortable lending me the $1 million. So we ended up agreeing to 1.15 with $1 million VTB and $1 million deferred. And 100,000 deferred. So we owe him 1.1.
Okay.
And now we're looking at turning that property into the original plan when I first did the video on it was to turn it into basically like a beach mansion, a beachfront house. But there's actually, I talked to the old owner of the property, and he's got drawings for a 4-unit condo to go on it. So we're actually looking at turning it into a condo right now. Those condos will be worth about $1 million a piece. So if it costs $1 million to pay them back, $1 million for construction, it's almost like buy two get. It's like BOGO on condos, right?
BOGO. What your ease of numbers is something that I'm going to take with me, and I want people to understand and feel that it's $1 million, it's 1.2, it's 1.5. I do like that you also acknowledge that you weren't in the space to be able to buy that at the time. So it's acknowledging that, but it's also an awareness to be able to say, I'm not actively looking for my next project, but I'm also not turning away the opportunities that might always present themselves. And so some people will just get, well, I already have a flip. Well, you can always be looking for your next one, or maybe you don't have the funds, but what are some creative ways to be able to buy properties when your funds are and that you're always looking to be able to acquire your next properties. I think that's a really great way to enter a room, enter a networking space, enter any kind of space. Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm an active investor. What kind of deals are you working on?
Yep. You got to tell people. You got to tell people what you're doing. Everybody needs to know. I posted about a week ago on my Facebook, in case anybody forgot, we buy houses. And somebody I know commented, I can't wait to have the confidence to do that. And I'm like, I didn't go firm on any deals by posting that. We buy houses. Let me know. Yeah. A bunch of people sent me stuff that I would never buy, single family homes, everything like that. I thanked them, said thank you for considering me. It's not going to work for me right now, but if there's ever anything else, think of me
you might
first.
have a network of people that you're able to share that with.
Exactly. So.
Absolutely. You know what? I'm kind of getting the wrap-up sign here from Larry. Kyle, I can tell we've got a ton of people. I got Nathan and Owen and Deanna and Heather. And you know what? We could probably go on for a long time. You are a wealth of knowledge. And I thank you very much for sharing with us your passion for real estate, your creativity around financing. I'm going to take that with me. And I'm going to say the next time there's $1 million opportunity, I'm going to think, what would Kyle Ford do here right now? So thank you very much for being my guest this week.
It was a pleasure being on. Thanks so much, Mandy, and all the best in the 2020 rocket. I know you're going to. So
Thank you.
Okay.
So this is Mandy Branham signing out for another week of the Full-Time Investor. If you've got investor questions, leave us a comment, like and share this post with your friends, put it up there so that other people can be inspired from what Kyle is doing and being able to see that, you know, it just takes an average person to do what seems like large, insurmountable investments, but really we're just taking little steps every day to get a little bit better. So if you want to reach out, I'm happy to be able to set up a discovery call with you to be able to see how I can add value to your investing as well. This is Mandy Branham signing out for another week of the Full-Time Investor.